Where do we stand with Jude Bellingham at the moment? What do you feel is the top line?
Well, it's a useful place to start for a number of reasons. One, he's probably the biggest name that is going to be talked about in the transfer market in the months ahead, but there is a caveat which is applicable to him in that January is likely to be quite quiet for paid transfers, purchases, money being spent. It's more likely as ever, despite the unique circumstances, to be loans or deals possibly set up for the summer. Perhaps lower teams in the Premier League, for example, struggling for survival, emergency situations around injuries, will commit financial outlays, but that as ever will be a greater focus in the summer. And that leads us nicely on to Bellingham, because it was always clear that no decision would be made on his part during the World Cup, and now his World Cup involvement is over. It's natural that the clubs who are interested in signing him are going to intensify their efforts to do so. The price that Borussia Dortmund will be able to command if they decide to sell, and if he decides that he wants to leave, is going to be such that only a small number of clubs will be able to afford him. It's been widely reported and speculated that Liverpool are leading the race to sign him, and they do want to sign him. Jurgen Klopp has, as we understand it, been leading that pursuit himself, and his power within the Liverpool hierarchy has now increased with the news that Julian Ward, the sporting director, is going to be stepping down at the end of the season, and a number of other changes, including him signing a new contract that has really brought him to the fore. Ward's predecessor, Michael Edwards, leaving too. But the feeling among other clubs who are interested in Bellingham is that while Liverpool may be the early front runners, the situation is still open. And that brings the likes of Real Madrid to the fore, maybe Manchester City too, who really like Jude Bellingham but don't think they're at the front of the queue. Chelsea also love him, but who is going to emerge as his most likely destination is still to be decided. Many of their circumstances are fluid, because we don't know if some of these clubs are going to qualify for the Champions League. We don't know how important that is to Jude Bellingham. I presume pretty important. We don't know what Liverpool's financial situation is going to be because of them being for sale. And as we said, Ward leaving at the end of the season. So much can change. And Bellingham has a really strong setup around him that is led by his family. They are lauded and praised by many people I speak to, and these people back them to make the right decision and the best decision for his career, which may be to stay at Borussia Dortmund. So this is now a live situation, and it's fascinating to see how it pans out.
So for people who are listening, a couple of this is like a quick fire round. When does his contract expire?
It expires in the summer of 2025. Okay. And Dortmund would, of course, love to extend it, but we'll see.
And in terms of the transfer fee, what are we talking?
The common conception is that it will be in excess of £100 million. But again, we don't know specifically at this point because it will be dictated by the market.
I'll come back to you in a moment, David, but it's quite interesting with the Liverpool link, because it just seems that is almost the number one team, and I'm just trying to work out why. And it's got to be more than the fact that he's obviously had a bit of a bromance with Jordan Henderson. We saw that great celebration when he scored that goal, and they were head to head. That was Henderson scoring. Obviously, Bellingham scored earlier on in the tournament. Trent Alexander-Arnold. They've been out together and things like that. Why do you feel, Adam, that Liverpool seems to be the natural fit?
Liverpool are desperate for a new midfield, right? Yeah. And he's the best midfielder that's on the market. Liverpool pushed pretty hard last summer for the player that played against Bellingham for France this weekend, Aurelien Tchouameni, who ended up at Real Madrid instead. And in the end, Liverpool just couldn't get up to the numbers, I think, that Real Madrid were getting to. But if the player would have said, "You're my preferred option," I think they'd have moved some pieces around to make that happen. The challenge for Liverpool is kind of, as David says, it's twofold. First point is that they're for sale, right? So Liverpool will say publicly, in the same way as Man United will say publicly, that until the club is sold, we'll continue to act in the same way. We want to invest in the club. We want to make sure it's appealing to investors as well that are going to buy it. But if I was selling something, am I going to spend 100 to 150 million pound from the business at that point? I don't know. Maybe that's what they'll do. But I think that's a fair question to ask. And I think the other point is also, there's other big players in the market. When Real Madrid decide they want to get someone, they're pretty good at doing that. And I think, I think it's public. It's a matter of public record that the law firm that worked on Eden Hazard's deal to Real Madrid from Chelsea, Onside Law, is also a law firm that's previously advised Jude Bellingham's family as well. So I think they would probably be able to say, we've assisted on a transfer to Real Madrid before. Maybe we'd be able to do that again. But as David says, ultimately this will be decided by the player. He's the most powerful person in this position. He's the most talented midfielder on the market, and there's a load of clubs that will be after him.
David, just picking up on a point that Adam's made there about the fact that it's almost like when you're selling your house, you think, how much work do I really need to do to get rid of this? Do I need to do up the kitchen, or can we just paint over a few cracks and here or there? But at the same time, it could almost be used almost in a Barcelona new president sort of way, that they come in and say, I'll bring you this guy, I'll make this my sort of signature signing. Is there any feeling in that this could be part of that sort of thing, or is that too sort of far ahead? Is it more about, right, Jurgen Klopp wants this player, let's get it done, and that's more pertinent than anything else?
I don't think they can think anywhere near that far advanced at this point. And somebody that I didn't mention in the first answer at Liverpool, who has also stepped away from his role, is Mike Gordon.
Yeah.
He's the president of FSG and was the key director at Liverpool, running that show. Jurgen Klopp has lavished him with credit on the record, and he has now moved to a different role to sort of focus on this potential sale or investment. And so you can't underestimate the amount of flux at Liverpool right now, and unless some agreement was reached before this that none of us know about, then they're going to have a battle on their hands, as Adam says. And many clubs, Chelsea for example, will see somebody like Bellingham as their potential statement signing in the way that you describe. But I don't think it's going to work like that with him. He's a really old head on young shoulders. He's very calm and considerate about his decisions. His parents are renowned for supporting him in the best possible way. And I think in this case, they're going to make a calculated decision based on what will serve his career best, irrespective of what other clubs might want or might try and push him into certain positions on. I don't think that will work in this case.
It's really interesting you mentioned that he's an old head on young shoulders. There was that quite sort of striking image towards the end of the game against France where he was giving out the orders in stoppage time, and Harry Kane was stood to one side. Not to discredit Harry Kane, because he's done a lot, and obviously he had a pretty difficult evening, but he has come in and shown that he is a future leader, and he's spoken very openly. He did an interview with the BBC basically saying, yeah, I want to be the best midfielder in the world. I'd love to captain the side. He is so confident. But Adam, I wanted to ask you about the next destination being influenced by the last two cabs off the Borussia Dortmund rank. Jadon Sancho to Manchester United has not gone to plan. Erling Haaland to Manchester City has gone to plan. Do you think that either of those examples will have any influence in terms of the end destination of those two players?
I don't expect Jude Bellingham to go to Manchester United. I don't know if that's got anything to do with Jadon Sancho. I just think Liverpool, Real Madrid, Manchester City are further ahead in that pursuit.
Yeah.
But United tried before. I mean, they've tried quite a few times over the years.
Yeah.
Particularly before he went to Borussia Dortmund, they had him down. They had, I think, his family down to the training ground, but ultimately weren't able to persuade him. And it was the right decision for his career. I mean, look where he is for all those players who decide to go to Borussia Dortmund at a young age, it seems to work out really well. So yeah, I mean, like Jadon's, each player is very different. I think Jadon Sancho is quite a different personality type to Jude Bellingham. That's not to say it's better or worse, but I think they are different characters. Erling Haaland again, in that way, but you know, for sure, I think anyone who's looked at the market for the last 10 years as a talented player will look at Manchester United with a little bit of trepidation. You know, unfortunately, that's the reality for them, because they've often bought players who have struggled to develop, who have maybe then gone elsewhere and performed a little bit better. I think the record this summer with Lisandro Martinez and Anthony is looking a little bit better. But that's the job of Erik ten Hag at Manchester United, to prove that it's a place again where players can go and not become worse.
Yeah, it will be fascinating to see where he ends up, and I think the influence of his family and making the right decision all the way through will come into play. And he has been tracked, you know, ever since he was 15, 16 years old when he was playing for Birmingham and things like that. He's been tracked all the way. David, final one on Bellingham, because obviously it's a story that's going to run and run. You've already said that, yeah, look, it's not going to happen in January, but is it almost copper bottom that it's going to happen in the summer, or he could just make the same decision? It could be kicked, another year, or there could be a contract extension. Or do you feel that there is now, especially having played such a big role amongst his England teammates, he will have been discussing the Premier League and things like that, that it's almost sort of preordained that it will happen sooner rather than later, i.e. in the summer?
I don't know is the truth, and I can't say something that I'm not sure of, but the strength of interest in him from the market, the level at which he is playing for club and country, and the knowledge at Dortmund of when to strike while the iron is hot. If they get to next summer, he'll have 2 years on his contract, so there's a bit of breathing space there. But if it isn't a new deal being signed and he goes on to 2024, then the value drops quite significantly. And all of that considered makes me think that a transfer in the summer of 2023 is more probable than him staying. But unless those options are right for him, he will have no issue staying, I'm sure.
But that said, on the, Borussia Dortmund coming into this and them being savvy, them knowing what to do, his star is probably at the highest it's ever been. So they'll be thinking, right, well, if he's not going to go into the summer, right, let's nail him down on a longer contract. So that's the most likely next step, you would presume, right? And
they did try with Sancho. They got a renewal done under the radar that was later revealed publicly, that they had an extra year than we all thought, and that maintained his value. They're very savvy operators. They still were willing to engage in a transfer if the numbers were right, and have become masters of knowing when to do these things.
Is there a clause?
I'm not aware of there being a clause. So if there is, it's been kept under wraps. But I think it's just a mature situation, a really strong relationship, in that when Jude Bellingham decides the time is right for him, and if the level of interest and finance that Borussia Dortmund expect arrives, then they will mutually decide to act upon certain options. I don't doubt that level of finance will arrive this summer, so then it will come down to if Jude Bellingham's ready to go. And I sense, given all of the factors we've discussed, that it probably will happen in the summer of 2023. It's just not a guarantee in the way you would say about certain players, just because of how firm he will be in only doing what is absolutely right for him.